Receipt of the minutes 4.1 is of the Lake Taupo Protection Project Joint Committee meeting minutes and consideration of the recommendation there. What is the recommendation? To extend the term, yep. There we go, it's all up there. Any points of clarification or queries on those minutes or checks? Just sure of Colleen on it, just any? Yep. No, all straightforward. Are you happy to move? Thanks, Councillor Leonard. Seconded by Councillor Williamson. All those in favour, please say aye. 4.3 is the grant of the easement to Unison 104 Acacia Heights Drive, Taupo. We have Mr. Nigel McCaddy, our in-house council. Good afternoon, Nigel.
Thank you, Worship. Good afternoon. I'll take the item as read. It's fairly mechanical sort of item. So the purpose is to have council grant an easement over certain reserves in favour of Unison for an electrical installation pursuant to the Reserves Act. So at its most basic, the council's put in a new reservoir, and that requires some additional upgrades to the Unison network. One of the requirements is for a cable to go across reserve land, and under the Reserves Act the council can grant an easement over the reserve land, but that's subject to a couple of conditions. The first is that it's not likely to materially alter or permanently damage the reserve, and secondly that the rights of the public in respect of the reserve are not likely to be permanently effective. So my understanding from the engineers is that this is a subsurface cable, so neither of those two conditions are likely to be affected, and therefore the recommendation is that the council goes ahead and grants an easement in favour of Unison for the cable across the reserve land.
Thanks, Nigel. Any queries? Councillor Guy, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Nigel. I just noticed when reading the paper that the tender was let in 2016. Is that correct? From Spartan Construction?
Yes, that's the information from our engineering staff. Yes.
Councillor Boddy.
Jim, just to follow up on that date as well, on page 26 it talks about we're advised that the site construction was completed July 17.
Yes, so that's the reservoir, I understand. So I think this is some work that was outstanding connected to the reservoir. So the reservoir was constructed, the electricity installation's gone in, but this granting of the easement to Unison is an outstanding matter connected with the original work to construct the reservoir.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Nigel. Any other questions of Nigel? No? Could I have someone move the suggested recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Westman. All those in favour, please say aye. It's against? Carried. 4.4 is a delegation to Commissioner, Whairoa North, private plan change costs objection. That's the Commissioner.
Yes, so...
Thank you, Nick.
Right, so the purpose of this one is to seek an approval from an independent hearings commissioner to hear, consider and make a decision on the Whairoa North plan change cost objection. So council has received an objection to the costs invoiced by council for the processing of the recent private plan change request. Under the Resource Management Act, the council is required to consider the objection, and if that objection is not resolved, then to give notice to the objector of a date, time and place for a hearing of the objection. Officers have worked with the plan change applicant to try and resolve the objection, which hasn't been successful. So now the council is required to have a hearing at which the applicant can put their case to the council, and the council can make a decision on it. Because the council doesn't want to be seen to be acting as a judge in its own cause, the council will need to, or good practice is to appoint an independent hearings commissioner to hear it. Where there is a point of disagreement is that the applicant has asked for a panel of commissioners to be appointed to hear the objection. The reasoning from the applicant is that because the application was heard by a joint panel of commissioners under the joint management agreement the council has with the Tū Wharetoa Trust Management Board, then the panel should also be appointed to hear the objection. Officers take a different view, having reviewed the joint management agreement. Officers' view is that that relates to the hearing of an application and not to other processes such as the hearing of this cost objection, which is ancillary to the original application hearing.
Thank you. Any follow-up comments, Nick, or any questions? Sounds like it makes sense to have an independent commissioner, to me, to Councillor Westman. Speaker on, sorry, Evelyn. Yeah.
So if the solo adjudicator is appointed and they rule in our favour that it is payable, can the applicant then say no, he's not happy with that outcome and go to the next level?
Yes.
And I just sort of wondered, do we just jump in there? Because you've already tried to mediate this for outcome.
Yeah, there is a right of appeal to the Environment Court from the decision from the Independent Hearings Commissioner. So you're right, if the applicant isn't happy, then there's the right to appeal it to the next level.
Councillor Taylor?
What's the normal process? A single commissioner or a panel?
There's probably no normal process. I mean, the normal process is that an independent is appointed. The situation here is that the council has the joint management agreement with Tū Wharetoa, so that's an additional layer over what's the norm. The officer's view, as I said, is that the joint management agreement doesn't apply in these particular circumstances. The applicant has a different view, and the paper sets out the reasons for holding that view.
Thank you. Just through the chair, I accept that, but in terms of an appeal on the cost of this, in the normal course of events, would one person review that, or would a panel review that?
So normally it'd be one person, and in the past it's been one person, but I'd say I can only think of one other example in the 15 years that I've been here that we've had an objection that's gone to hearing. So it's not normal, it's not common, but generally it'll be one person.
I guess earlier on in the process of developing the plan change, there was a decision point under clause 23 of the first schedule. It was a procedural matter relatively early on in the process, and that was undertaken through delegation to a single commissioner. What we're talking about here in the context of a cost objection is again a relatively procedural matter. We'd expect it to be undertaken, as Gareth says, by an individual commissioner. The reason that we tend to have 3, or in this case 5 commissioners who undertake the substantive hearing on the application is because there's normally a wide array of issues, and having a panel of people enables a whole lot of different perspectives to be brought to make sure that all of those different issues are assessed from those different perspectives. When we're talking about a cost objection, this is a relatively mechanical and, as I say, procedural matter. So that's why, as officers, we're very comfortable with having a single commissioner.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Westman?
I just wasn't sure what that cost was.
We're not sure exactly what that cost is either. A little bit will depend on exactly how the Commissioner wishes to run the hearing, and under the RMA they've got significant scope to change the way that that's run. They may wish to do a lot of the exchange of evidence just on the papers, so via email, or they may choose to have some representation in person, and that will obviously change some of those costs a little bit. Our estimate is it's going to be in the ballpark of about 5,000 for the Commissioner. Obviously, if we went to a panel of 3, then we'd be looking at triple those costs.
We do normally set aside a yearly fee in our annual plan or the long-term plan for legal costs, and this is where this kicks in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So we've got a small amount of legal budgeting and cost centre to cover this. Obviously, if we go to 3 commissioners, we'll probably wipe out about half of the yearly budget.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Nigel's recommendation up there that we delegate to a commissioner on these on the cost objection. So, could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Park, seconded by Councillor Rankin. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you very much, Nick. 4.5. Adoption of the revegetation guide and plan for planting on Taupō District Council administered land. We have Nick again.
I'll just start by offering an apology. This is Cara Scott's paper, and she would love to be here. She's poured a huge amount of time and energy into the preparation of this guide. Unfortunately, she's on leave. Well, very fortunately for her, although she's down in Queenstown, where I gather it's a little colder than it is here today. So I'm largely going to take the paper as read. I guess the one point I would make is the purpose of this guide is to provide more consistency in terms of the decision making that council officers undertake when it comes to a whole array of different planting which takes place on council administered land, from people undertaking some resource consent work, say a new subdivision, right through to the likes of greening Taupo or local schools wanting to do planting days. The guide's intended to make sure that when we're looking at all those different options, we're doing so in a coordinated way. So, as I say, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nick. Councillor Guy. And
Just through the chair, who is the designated council staff that has delegation to allow and authorise the planting on TDC land?
My understanding is this goes through our reserves team, who generally take the inquiries from this array of different groups. So Greg Hadley, I'm sure you're very familiar with. So as I say, this is, in many respects, this is a very operational document. However, we're conscious that it's got an external face, so that's why we felt it was appropriate to bring it up to you so that you're aware of the sort of guidance that we're looking to provide.
Some of the councils, and myself included, spent some time with greening Taupo and over the course of an afternoon last week, and I must say it was, you know, a fantastic experience to see what is happening within our district. And I just wanted to know who on the TDC staff oversees the planting. So will that be the reserves team? I read through that there are certain plants and trees that are recommended. So we have somebody that actually monitors that and sees that that is actually being adhered to?
Correct. So that sits with our reserves team.
Great, thank you.
We're on the ground.
Councillor Mack.
So just looking at it as well, obviously I'm under the environment portfolio, so we're the same, looking for all the different plantings that we do. I do look at some of the new subdivisions, and take Motuoka for example. There doesn't seem to be a minimum standard from that developer, say, to actually plant the green spaces. Where has that changed since he did it, which was a few years ago, to say the new subdivisions out at 2 Mile Bay?
Or we definitely have some. Well, I've noticed some variation in terms of the quality of planting you can get between different subdivisions over the years, and a lot of the time that comes down to the level of enthusiasm from the individual developer. If I think about some of the work I've seen out at Kinloch, massive of amounts of money have gone into the planting out there, and that's occurred in situations where the developer can see the ongoing value in terms of the saleability of a subdivision. There have also been other areas where subdivision planting which has gone and has failed miserably, partly because we sometimes get contractors coming into the district to undertake that work who aren't familiar with our conditions. And one of the benefits of this guide and working with our officers is they get a better understanding of what our conditions are and how our pumice soils and our climate reacts differently with those plants. So the intent is that this guide is hopefully going to make sure that those plantings, when they are undertaken, actually last in the long term rather than failing after a number of years.
So just on that, because greening Tabarin, as you say, they all do a sterling job, but under the environment thing now, we're looking at having to plant more and more to basically come up to our standard that we're in. I just think that with these subdivisions being so much land, as you say, is it still subjective to how they plant them, or are we saying you really should, under these big pieces of land, actually plant them to a certain standard with, if you like, the natives that we show them?
So planting through a subdivision happens for a couple of different reasons. One, a developer might choose to do it from an amenity perspective, so they want their subdivision to look pretty. That's kind of on them. Second type of planting can happen when there's an environmental reason that council has addressed and required that planting to take place. So that might be screening, for example, visually screening. If I think about some sort of lifestyle or large lot residential subdivision in the past, that's required screening to address some visual impact from public property or neighbouring property, or to address stormwater issues is another common situation. So if I think about the Brentwood Gully as an example, the developer, Jarden Properties, when they developed that, they were required to undertake some native planting through that gully to actually physically address the stormwater which will flow through there. Now those different types of planting have different standards. So the sort of planting that we would require to address stormwater is something we would stipulate through the resource consent, and they would have to provide a planting plan, and our consents team would go along and monitor that and make sure that they'd planted what they were supposed to in the locations where it was supposed to go. Similarly, if it was from a visual perspective, we would again stipulate through the resource consent that it had to be certain species of a certain height planted in a certain location. So the individual resource consents seem to identify those particular requirements for plantings, and it's all driven by the particular need on that site.
Sorry, I'm not going to labour it. So if you go out of town towards the airport taker, on the right-hand side we've got an old subdivision, you don't see the housing. On the left-hand side where we're putting all the new houses, we obviously haven't allowed for a vegetation corridor to block those houses, so we've basically got what looks like huge subdivisions.
Yes.
So we haven't put any effort into actually beautifying that look for the residents, if you like, and for people driving.
Yep.
Is that...
And our district plan, other than some bare minimums in terms of specimen trees along road frontages, doesn't require a huge amount of landscaping. That might be something that comes through an individual resource consent application in response to particular issues. One of the differences you see as well between old and new subdivisions is a lot of the private planting kicks in after a few years and starts to soften the look of those subdivisions. Whereas if I think about the new subdivisions out on the trip towards the airport, they just haven't had the chance to put those plants in and see them start to flourish. But it would be very rare for a residential subdivision to have a whole lot of planting put in place to mitigate a visual effect. That I can't think of many situations where that's taken place, other than, as I say, some large lot residential, where they've created quite a dense development, which is over and above the district plan requirements.
All right. Councillor Leonard?
Notwithstanding the great work of the likes of groups like Greening Taupo, has there been any consideration to fire breaks? And also, like, we're looking at some rather large grass areas that are quite enjoyable for people to walk on, but if they're completely planted without a clear line of sight, I don't know that walkers would feel that safe in some of those areas walking, and whether we're taking away some recreation areas from some people where they'd only be forced to then walk on the road.
Look, completely agree, and that's the beauty of having our reserves department involved in the selection of sites. They're well aware of the areas which are heavily utilised from a recreation perspective, and you'll see in the criteria it talks about the suitability of different types of land, and there's a heavy emphasis on picking up those marginal land areas, the likes of gullies, where vegetation can add some biodiversity benefit, but the recreational benefits are, well, let's say they're more focused towards, say, walking and running than they are kicking a ball around. Certainly the SIPTED principles run through all the design work that we do, regardless of whether we're building a building or planting out of reserve, and that's something that will flow through into the decision making around what gets planted and where.
Very good. Any other questions, Nick? Yeah, Councillor Boddy?
I noticed the recommendation is to delegate approval of future updates of the Chief Executive, but we do have that guide, which I think Mr. Carroll refers to, as to what should be planted where and when. So I think it covers it in regards of looking into the future, because we have the business about not cutting trees down for views, but then council comes along and plants a tree in front of a view, and that's the business with our corridor as well as we come into town. So I'm quite happy with the recommendation as it states.
Cool. Are you happy to move that, Councillor Boddy? Yep, cool. Been moved by Councillor Boddy, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you, and if you could pass our thanks on to Cara.
Certainly will. Thank you very much.
That. All right. Item number 4.6, Class 4 Gambling and TAB Venues Policy Review. Terry.
Good afternoon, councillors, Your
Good.
Worship. So this report is a follow-up from the workshop we had in August, where we talked about the policy and the points we're looking at. At the end of that workshop, we didn't have a clear signalling in which way to go, and so officers have had a discussion, and we've come up with some recommendations there on what we think. There were also a couple of questions raised that were not answered thoroughly during that, and so we've attached those in the facts that we've attached to the report.
Okay.
So we'll take the report as read.
Thanks very much, Timmy. Okay. Where did we get to now? I'm just trying to think of this one. Any questions first? So what are you suggesting there? 1 and 2, is it?
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to work out, where did we get to? Are we holding them at the same level, or?
So what we've proposed in the report is that we adopt a sinking lead, recommend a second adoption of a sinking lead, meaning that we're at 151 missions in the district. We will keep it at 151, and as they shut down, they will just continue. Natural attrition will happen,
Right.
and that we would have a no relocation policy as well, which doesn't really impact much, because as we mentioned in the report, only one venue anyway would be looking at relocating into town, if at all, out of it. And so that's what we've proposed there.
Okay.
And that's, we've drafted the policy and we'll put out
All
a
right.
listing.
So as a new hotel comes to town, you cannot have put new machines in?
Yes, essentially, yes. If a new hotel came into town,
Yeah.
I would imagine that wouldn't necessarily be what they were hoping to do there. No.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any questions now? Councillor Taylor.
More of a comment than a question. Having read through the draft social impact assessment, thank you for preparing that. I'd have to say that was one of the more comprehensive, detailed and informative documents I've read in a long time, and that was really impressive, so thank you for that.
Thanks, Timmy. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Any other questions or queries? All right, there's a recommendation up there, 1 and 2. Some names. Right. 3 councillors. Any volunteers? Who know? I don't even know how to play these things. I wouldn't have a clue.
Through the
So
chair.
I'm hoping-
Through the chair.
Yes, Councillor Williamson.
Without preparing to create work for myself. I was involved in that 3 years ago, I think, with Councillor Body, so I'm willing to put my name forward.
Good.
Having a bit of a background, well, that's a good or bad thing, but I'm prepared to put
Thank
my
you.
name forward for that one for start.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williamson.
I'll nominate Councillor Body as well.
Thank you. Is that a... Try, yeah, it's called site visits. Site visits, yeah. So Councillor Body, are you happy to accept that fine nomination from Councillor Taylor? All right, so Councillor Williamson, Councillor Body, and we've got to even this up a bit, don't we?
Diversity, I think.
Diversity. Yeah. Councillor Guy, you're from a hospitality background. Any of the other ladies?
People you don't manage any premises with cookies in it, no? You do, maybe.
Yeah. Councillor Westman has withdrawn her support.
I'm happy to
Councillor Guy,
do
good,
that, yeah.
done. All right, we've got those, Shane. Councillor Williamson, Body, and Councillor Guy. Cool. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Park, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Mack. All those in favour, please say aye. It's against, carry. Thank you very much, Timmy. Good to see you. All right. 4.7, Councillors' August Performance Report. Mr. CEO.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, Ellen and myself will tag team through the report this month. As you see, we're pretty light on the ground at this point.
John's here.
Oh, and John's here as well. Pretty sorry to see you there, John.
And Tina.
And we're pretty light on the ground at the moment with school holidays and people trying to get their leave down, as those of you on Audit Risk Committee would have heard the other week in terms of our leave balances. But in terms of the month just been, obviously the opening of the Great Lake Pathway was a bit of a highlight for us. One that we're getting heaps of really good feedback from the public, and I think even just going down there and using it yourself, you see the increased use, which is really neat. Not unexpectedly, the conflict between users has arisen again, and I think that's just again due to the numbers of users and the increased speed of particularly bikes along the path. What's become really clear is that for some reason bikers believe that pedestrians should get out of the way of them, which is the opposite to what it used to be. So we are getting some signage put in just to say that obviously pedestrians have right of way. I don't know whether it will make much of a difference, but it's worthwhile giving it a go. And then the other major project, of course, is the $20.6 million town centre Taupo upgrade program, which we're working along at earnest now with the second set of intersections out to get in their detailed design, and work will commence on those pretty quickly. So you'll see some more road cones in the next little while. So those are the sort of the big exciting projects underway at the moment. Everything else, Your Worship, is going to plan. Ellen, John, do we?
Ellen, want to go for investments? Excuse me.
Yeah, investments are on track as much as they can be with the environment as it is, but yeah, we're meeting all our requirements.
Oh, we just talk about a bit louder. Okay. Community services.
You just going back to the. Do I understand the next Tukopa Tukanapanaba meeting has been cancelled? Just not actually on the or postponed.
Sorry, what was the question, John?
Oh, I think just on the development, the Taupo catchment document on page 122. I thought I received an email recently say that was meeting was not happening now on November 17th. Could be wrong. Just had a feeling.
We'll come back to on that. That's the one we'll find out. Community services and community facilities. Someone want to do that?
We'll walk you through, but you'll see there that they're all pretty much green. A couple of the reds there we've talked about before, which is mainly in the reserve management plans, and the destination playground in Taupo, which you're aware of, which we've delayed due to the timing of being able to get machinery into the country with COVID and not wanting to have that playground out of action over the Christmas period. So work on that will start early next year. The playground installers are telling us that they've got a couple of other councils before us in the line. We're trying to get them as close as, as early as what we can in the 2021 year, but worst case scenario will be sort of mid-year, May, June.
Just through the chair, Gareth, is the indoor pool at the AC Bars still on track for the first week of October?
10th of
October.
it was.
Okay.
It'll be welcome to get that one back on. I know the swimmers are struggling at the moment.
Yeah. Water, obviously.
One in community facilities in regards with playgrounds. The one in Jarden Mile has had one of its equipment dismantled now for some considerable time. There's only 2 things that children in that area can actually play on. Is there any update when that may be replaced, fixed?
I didn't know that. So Jarden, at the top of Jarden?
Yeah, by the reserve.
I'd have to follow that one up, Councillor. I'm not aware of the details. I'll get back to you.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to talk us through water as well?
So yeah, water is what it is, Your Worship. You'll see there that the upgrade to the Acacia Bay is on track. The others there you've been aware of and we've talked about in the past. Kinloch is all on track.
Very good. Wastewater.
Transportation, I think.
Oh, sorry. Skip one. Yep. Transportation. Yep.
So again, all on track there.
Hooker Falls. Just about all done.
It is. Both Hooker Falls and the Mapra footpaths are just about all done, which are both looking pretty good, I think.
Okay. Wastewater.
Wastewater, so probably the one to report here, which actually isn't in the report, but is obviously to acknowledge the wastewater spill that we had during the month, which was most unfortunate off the out of the Taupo wastewater treatment plant. As we've reported to you, that was partly due to operator error and partly due to a system failure, and we have got some funding put aside to be able to put right the system failure, so hopefully that won't happen again. That's out of the government money, the $8.3 million that we've got out of the government for water and wastewater projects.
Okay, cool.
I would expect probably in the next month or so the next page, which is the list of WRC enforcement action, that will have that one on there. I fully expect that we'll get some sort of action as a result of that.
Okay. So that
Solid waste is all on track, Your
waste.
Worship. Stormwater is pretty much all on track.
Just hang out if anyone's got any questions. Stormwater.
Pretty much all on track. Obviously we had a big storm event on Sunday and there was a fair bit of flooding around as a result of that, so Brent and the team have been kept pretty busy.
Alright. Economic
Where does
development.
it sit with the runoff up in the industrial area following that downpour? There was a huge washout of pumice that came. Is that being followed up?
Yep, so that will be one of the ones that that the team have followed up. I know we had quite a bit of flooding in and around the Nukaho area, some in the industrial area and in other areas. Spa Park, as an example, got hit very hard, took out a couple of tracks, so yeah, the team are working through those on a priority basis. A lot of the flooding, to be honest, was the purpose of those reserves, particularly those stormwater reserves. They actually were doing their job, which is for it to pull and then dissipate over slowly. It's when it's in places that you weren't expecting is when there's an issue. And that's, again, just not wanting to add too much to it, but it's one of the reasons, going back to that previous paper that Nick presented about the vegetation, one of the reasons we do plant those areas quite a lot and leave them natural is that helps dissipate those water volumes. ED, John?
Oh, just real quickly, so I'll let my 3 elected members who sit on the ED portfolio, if there's anything you want to add, but just the events with the drop-in of levels are beginning to come back online, so we've got a country and western event apparently that's coming up, so I'm into
Saturday
a bit of
night,
line dancing
7
myself,
o'clock,
so you'll be there, won't you?
Yes.
Country, Western.
Well,
Yeah, it's good to see them coming back. I think we've got about 100 events coming back in October, so the team are getting a bit more upbeat because it's been pretty bad for them. So That's all I've got.
Oh, that's good news if we're getting some bookings back in, that's for sure. All right, okay, thank you very much. Quite quickly done, eloquently done. 4.7, so the recommendation that we receive the report for the month of August. Thank you, Councillor Williamson, seconded by Councillor Rankin. All those in favour, please say aye. It's against. 4.8, the review of the mural discretionary fund policy. Tina.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this was initiated in 2016, it's due for review, and there's just one suggestion. It seems to be working pretty well, with just one suggestion towards the end of the document around the fact that the fund, the amount of the fund is decided through the long-term planning process.
Cool. I don't know if anyone's got any questions, but I think, what was the figure? Was there 15k?
15,000, yes.
But it's always seriously
Under that, yes, correct.
5 or 6 grand. Have you got the figure from last year? Sorry, I should have asked you.
Sorry?
You haven't got the figure from last year?
No, not offhand.
I think it was about 6 or 7
Yep.
thousand. So it's
Yep.
designed as an emergency fund for people, you know, whether they've had a fire or whatever sort of thing. But the biggest thing, so myself and the Deputy Mayor converse about each application and make a decision from there. But any questions of Tina regarding the policy? So the figure gets decided through the LTP?
Yeah, so in my draft I've kept the 15,000 in, and that can be debated when you get to the LTP discussion to see whether you consider that sufficient or not.
And just if we could have the information on what has been spent over the last 2 or 3 years, would be good, just the figure. Very good. Okay. No questions? Happy to move. Councillor Guy, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Park. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Carried. What else we got, Tina? Meetings, is it? Yeah. 4.9 is council appointments and engagements for October.
So there's a couple of appointments on here, and one is around representative to the Wairau Community Trust. We originally didn't appoint anybody to that when we set up our community organisations, so it's probably opportune to do that now. And then there's just some changes to the Waikato Regional Transport Committee in terms of primary and alternate. And Waikato Regional Council have established a Regional Connections Committee, and there's a suggested appointment there as well.
So someone, councillor on the Wairau House, have we not had?
No, we decided not to appoint anybody at that time.
Cool. All right, yeah. Not that I know of.
Yeah, so they've requested Councillor Guy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Okay. Oh, thanks, Kathy. All right, so Councillor Guy in there, and number 2, representation. Yeah, so obviously Kevin, primary representative, and Anna is the first alternative.
Yep.
Cool. Yep. Cool. Okay. Regarding those dates of meetings.
Yep. And so the third one is for Councillor Taylor to be appointed to the Regional Connections Committee.
Oh, is there another one?
Yep. There's another page. Yep.
Oh, sorry. Oh, there is 2. Yeah. Regional Connections Committee.
And then we've got a Zone 2 meeting on Friday the 30th of October, hosted by Haraki.
Silence is golden. You'd like to go? John? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Williamson. Anyone else for zone 2? No?
And Your Worship, in terms of the engagements, there's 2 more to add. So Thursday the 15th of October, there's which are now in your diary, so area representation review and the extraordinary meeting of the Taupo Reserves and Roading Committee.
Okay, on what date's that?
15th.
Both on the 15th, okay. Good. Those are? Yep, cool. Okay, thanks, Tina. All right, could I have a mover, please? Thanks, Guy, seconded by Councillor Williamson. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, it's carried. 4.10, members' reports. Any reports need to be handed in or anything? No, straightforward. Sorry, Councillor Leonard.
Just if anybody's wanting to attend the agricultural days in the district at the local schools, Broadlands will be on the 18th, Reporoa Primary on the 17th, Tarahonga on the 23rd, and Marotiri on the 16th.
And they're very, very enjoyable. The best sausage, what are they called? Sizzles in town. Actually, just thinking about the Rangataiki committee, did we set another date? The East Rural? We set another date for that? Sorry.
Next date's the 19th of November, if I'm correct.
Okay. Right. All right. Thank you very much. Did we get a mover and seconder on that? Not yet. Councillor Westerman. Thank you very much, Councillor Mack. All those in favour, please say aye. It's against. Carried.